Hello, welcome to the Crime Survivor Speak podcast. My name is Aswad Thomas. I'm the National Director of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. We are a national network of over 200,000 victims of crime across the country. If you haven't already subscribed to stay up to date on the latest episode, you can do that now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other streaming services by clicking the link on your screen or going to the website at www.cssj.org/podcast. We have another amazing guest today, another amazing leader in our organization. Ingrid Archie is the organizing director of TimeDone. TimeDone is a national membership community working to eliminate legal barriers for formerly incarcerated people to rebuild their lives in post-conviction poverty. And just like Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, TimeDone is the other flagship project of the Alliance for Safety and Justice. So CSSJ and TimeDone work very closely in our organization, and you're going to be hearing from one of those leaders that's not only leading the work in California, but also across the country. Ingrid is an incredibly important voice in this movement who turned her own experiences with violence and incarceration into leadership as a community organizer and a civic engagement specialist. She's also one of the most amazing women I've ever met in my life. She's also a mother of 6. She's from Los Angeles, California, and we can't wait to talk with you today. Ingrid, welcome to the Crime Survivor Speak podcast.
Hey. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I love it.
Of course, only the best for you, Ingrid.
I love it. Thank you.
So yeah, Ingrid, let's dive right into it. I've been thinking about our conversation. We were just in Austin at South by Southwest where we had a panel discussion and you and I did a TV interview as well. And it really got me thinking more and more about your story and the work that you're currently doing, but also what led you to this work. Here in the United States, many people have heard about the school to prison pipeline, but we don't talk enough in the United States about the victimization to incarceration pipeline. So, Ingrid, to begin this conversation, would you share some of your own survivor experiences that have led you to your role as an advocate and fuel your passion for the TimeDone community?
Thank you so much. I want to start as a child. I grew up in an era in the 80s, the war on drugs. And in this era, specifically in my community and in my household, there was high amounts of violence that I saw outside of my community when I would just walk to the store, walk to the laundromat. And then within my home, I witnessed a lot of violence. I was abused by my mother because she was on drugs. There wasn't a lot of resources for her to get help. She had 3 kids, and she just, I don't want to say she intentionally took her anger out on us, but when all of those things are happening in a home and in the community, sometimes people inadvertently take those things out on their kids. I was abused as a child for many years, up until the age of 7, where the police had to be called and the LAPD physically removed us from my mother's home and placed us in emergency. It was a foster home. They placed us in a foster home. And that was because I saw that and because I witnessed that. I thought that was how you were supposed to respond when something is happening. It's supposed to be violent. Not only was I a victim of violence, but I saw my family, I saw my mother victimize other people as a response to anything. It was always violence. And then when I'm on my way to school, I'm witnessing gang shootings. I'm seeing chalk bodies as I walk to school. I'm thinking it's hopscotch. But later on, I found out those were bodies that I was seeing. And every time I would go to school every morning, it was always new chalk and a new body. So this was like my first inception to understanding how people respond to things and me thinking that this was normal. So as I grew up, as I got older, my response to things were violent. I began to get into relationships that were violent. I was in a domestic violence relationship on 3 different occasions. Once where I was stabbed, the other where I was hit in the face. It was just different situations. And in the back of my mind, because as a little child, during 0 to 5 years, where your brain is developing and I'm seeing violence, I'm thinking that this is normal. I got into advocacy and started to understand that this was not normal. I just remember in the last domestic violence relationship I was in, I remember praying to God and Him telling me that I'm preparing you for something that you need to be qualified for. And you going through this is going to connect you to people. And I did not understand that at that time until I became who I am. And I'm like, wow.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Ingrid. It seems like every conversation I have with you, I learned so much about what you've went through and also always feel inspired with your leadership. We did a report last year, and something that we learned in this report is that 9 out of 10 people with their record have been a victim of a crime, right? 9 out of 10 people have been a victim of a crime before they came in contact with the justice system. So, how do you think this understanding and the needs and experiences of people who have been formerly incarcerated or have an old record, how should that understanding that they've been victims help shape public policy and the kinds of services that are available for people that have been caught up in the criminal legal system?
Oftentimes, we see narratives on TV. We see how police treat people who are poor in poor communities. And until we like really take a deep dive and understand that people in poor communities are victimized first before they respond to things, that definitely will shape how we craft bills, how we pass legislation in communities where people are victimized first, and understanding that there has to be a care first approach. Say, for instance, when there was an opioid crisis. That's what they called it, an opioid crisis in affluent neighborhoods. In our neighborhoods, they called us super predators when it was the exact same thing. So just taking that deep dive, taking a step back and really understanding that and really taking it all in and shaping policies where we understand how poor people are victimized for being poor, and how when we shape these policies, it's trauma on top of trauma if we're not shaping policies that are going to change the quality of someone's life in neighborhoods where people are already victimized because they're poor.
Ingrid, to people who may not know what Time Done is, can you explain that? What is Time Done and what are some of the goals of the movement that you are leading?
Absolutely. So, Time Done is a movement to remove barriers for people who have been impacted by being in jail or prison or have an arrest record. And in this, we understand that removing barriers is just the one thing. The other thing is making sure that we connect people to resources so that people can move upward in mobility, changing their lives, and being able to realize that they have dreams that can come true once barriers are removed and once they're connected to resources that can change the quality of their lives in meaningful ways.
How many legal restrictions or barriers that exist for people with old records? And what are some of the things that you can't do if you have a old record?
So, number one, there are over 70 million people who are impacted nationally by over 40,000 legal restrictions. These legal restrictions include not being able to get an apartment because they have an application that asks if you've been convicted of a felony. And if you have, then they will definitely cycle you out of that application process. Not just housing, but employment, certain licenses, being able to chaperone your kid to a field trip. There's just, like I said, there's 40,000 of them, and those are just a couple.
So you mentioned the 40,000 legal barriers that exist for over 70 million people with records. What are some of the short and long-term impacts of these policies can have on people with records?
That's a good question. For me, myself, having been impacted by a record almost my whole life, I have not experienced or seen any short term effects. They've all been long, from mental health to physical health to living in subpar housing to feeling hopeless to feeling powerless to seeing your kids be impacted by something that they had absolutely nothing to deal with because you're working a job that don't pay much and you can't even afford to put your kids in basketball or football or cheerleading or whatever it is that they want to do because your record won't allow you to do it. So the impacts are long, they last a lifetime. You receive a sentence when you commit a crime, and after you commit that crime, you serve a lifetime of living a life that is just poor quality, realizing that you may have dreams that you want to see lived out, and because you have a record and you're constantly being told no, the mental effects, again, feeling hopeless, feeling like you don't matter, feeling like you just never ever gonna be able to get ahead, and feeling like you never gonna live the life that you thought that you would live because you made a mistake. Like the impacts are endless and they last so long. However, the upside to that is removing barriers. So that's how they become short term when we pass laws and pass legislation to where people could be able to really see meaningful change in their lives and not have to check that box and not have to disclose that you have a record at all because you were able to expunge it or you were able to clear that record because of laws that are being passed.
You serve as the organizing director for Time Done, and you play a pivotal role in leading and mobilizing not just people with records in states like California, but across the country of individuals who've been impacted by not only incarceration, also crime as well. Can you share with us some of the key initiatives or some of the strategies that Time Done has implemented to help amplify the voice of its members and advocate for meaningful policy change?
Absolutely. Some of the key initiatives that we have been fortunate enough to pass started in California, like you said, with AB 1076. That was one of the first bills that we passed to be able to automate records where people automatically already qualify for expungement. That and subsequent bills laid the pathway for us to pass one of the biggest pieces of legislation that this country has ever seen, which was Senate Bill SB 731. And that bill allowed people who have been to prison and some pretty violent crimes were able to be expunged off of their record and people were able to move forward with their lives. And these are not people who are committing crimes. These are people who have been home for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years who just need something to be removed off of their record that they can be able to get better jobs and be able to live a different type of life. Nationally, we have been able to pass bills in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Texas, and one other state that I'm leaving out where people before weren't able to have access to clean slate laws or record expungement, where they now have access to be able to get some things taken off of their record. And that brings down the barriers. That brings down some of those 40,000 barriers that people face. And it unlocks the ability for them to be able to move forward and once again raise the quality of their life and live better lives and then advocate for more legislation to where more barriers are removed because we're passing more laws in the future that will unlock opportunities for people to move forward and have their records clear or removed.
Wow, that's incredible. So you all have been able to, in California and in states across the country, help more than 10 million people with the opportunity to get their record expunged or have that clean slate. So you talked about people with records coming together to organize to change policies. Can you also talk a little bit about what are some of the other things that Time Done offer to its members outside of engaging in policy?
Absolutely. We offer our members an amazing resource platform. It's called the Member Service Program. We believe, once again, that removing barriers, making sure that members are connected to resources that will change the quality of their lives. And so some of those resources include partnering with BetterHelp, where people have access to over 30,000 clinicians nationally, where they can be able to have conversations with people that are private. We have a partnership with Access Coupons. We know everyone loves to save a dollar. Definitely for people with records and some of people who have lower wage paying jobs that are already struggling, it's important that we make things accessible to people where they could always save on different things, everyday stuff like an oil change. Or say, for instance, you want to be able to take your family to a theme park. People love theme parks in the summertime. Access offers a lot of coupons to where people could do that. School supplies, Christmas shopping, and a whole plethora of different savings that's available from that platform. We have a partnership with Honest Jobs. Honest Jobs is a platform that is tailored to people specifically with records. And the amazing thing about this platform is that you can go on there, strictly confidential, and you go on the app, you fill out all the information, and they will match you up with employers no matter where you are in the country. That's tailored to your background and also tailored to your skill set. The other thing is that they have resources that's available through the Honest Jobs platform, because they understand that finding a job is not the only thing that people with records want to do, that we want to be connected with different stuff. So they have an amazing resource platform that's there. And then also we have a great partnership with credit.org, where we are able to offer credit repair education for people with records. People with records are an untapped audience that people think just don't matter. We make sure people understand that when you go to jail, sometimes things happen that are outside of your control, and your credit gets messed up, you owe child support, things of that nature. And it's important to educate people. Some people don't even know what a bank account is or even how to access that. And so we tailor this service to educate people specifically with records, because we want to see people be homeowners. We want to see people who have business ideas get their credit in line so that they can go ask for that business loan. We understand, once again, that expunging your record is different, but we know for sure that when a person can be able to see their dreams come alive, that also changes the quality of life. And then they can go tell somebody else, and then they turn into an advocate and a leader. And that is the narrative that we want to shift through offering our members all these wonderful services through our member service platform.
So if you are out there, if you are listening, if you have an old record, you can go to the website at timedone.org to learn more about the Time Done program, but also to get connected to some of the resources that Ingrid just shared, like free credit repair education through credit.org, honest jobs. If you or a loved one, someone who have faced challenges with getting employment through honest jobs, you can able to get matched with employers, and also access to coupons. Everybody loves to save money, especially in this tough economy, and also access to counseling as well. So once again, just by being a member of Time Done, very similar to our crime survivor safety and justice program, there are no membership dues, there are no fees. And so you're able to get access to tangible resources and support, get involved in policy to help Ingrid and the Time Done leaders change more policies across the country. Ingrid, I want to go back a little bit. I wanted to go back and talk about before you joined the Alliance for Safety and Justice and before you joined Time Done, you was one of the most impactful leaders in the Proposition 47 campaign. You have a personal connection to that campaign. You've heard about Proposition 47, I believe, when you were incarcerated. Can you talk a little bit more about how has Proposition 47 impacted your life personally, and what doors did that provide for you in benefiting from Proposition 47?
So I first heard about Prop 47. I was in the county jail fighting my case, and I seen it was during the election times. This was in October, and I saw the ad on the television, and it was saying what Prop 47 will do. And I looked up and I was like, wow, if I got a second chance, what would I do with it? It was just a quick thought, right? And then I just went back to my everyday. I remember 3 weeks later, I went to court. All of the public defenders were telling people, don't plea out to your cases. Just hold it over to the next court date because you qualify for Prop 47 and you're likely to be released. I didn't get told this from my public defender, but the great thing about it is this is where I got to discover the fact that I was a hell of an advocate because I advocated for myself. I took my time that day. I got to prison and people were like leaving, getting calls in the middle of the night that they were being released, and that it was this thing on the yard about people are going home on Prop 47. So I started to ask people, and they have these things called fade sheets in prison where it says whatever it is that you went to prison for. And I looked at another girl's sheet and she told me that her time got cut in half and she was going home. Me and her had the exact same charge. So I was like, who do I need to talk to? She was like, go talk to your counselor. So I went to my counselor, I talked to her, and I was like, I have this charge on my record, and I think I qualify for Prop 47. The counselor said I don't qualify for Prop 47, that this was only for people who have been in prison for long periods of time. The biggest barrier to taking advantage of stuff like this is when people don't have the knowledge about a lot of these bills that are passed that impact us, right? Thank God that once again, I was a hell of an advocate because I was like, I'm not just gonna accept her no. I'm gonna go into this dorm and I'm gonna read this paper and I'm gonna see what the court says. So at the time, I did not have money on my books. I was completely indigent. And when you're indigent, they give you sheets of paper and they give you envelopes. So I followed the directions on the wall when I went into my dorm that said that you had to send a letter to the courts and one to the clerk. And so I just wrote a quick note saying that I may qualify. I sent a copy of my fade sheet to the court clerk and to the court. And I gave my case number, my CDC number. And 4 months later, I got called to the counselor's office, to the same counselor. And she said that I was going home early and that I qualified for Prop 47. I was like, look at God. The same person that told me no had to turn around and tell me yes. So this for me, for the normal person, they like, okay, you just got lucky. No, that wasn't luck. That was my first thought of knowing that I was an advocate, because if I could advocate for myself like that and not let no be a deterrent, but instead turn into power and to empower myself to write that letter anyway and take it all the way to the top, I knew that it was something to be said about that. And it cut my sentence in half, 8 months. I was able to come home. My oldest daughter, she was going through a bad situation that I wasn't aware of. And it's crazy because when we pass these laws, we don't understand that we are breaking generational curses in people's lives when people are able to take advantage of it, come home early, and take advantage of second chances. And so I was able to support my kid. I was able to not miss her birthday. And more importantly, because of that trauma that we were going through, that's how I met Lenore. And she was like, come to Survivor Speaks and bring your daughter, and you guys will be in the space of different people who are survivors of the exact same thing. You don't have to talk about it, but you could definitely feel the support and feel the love. So we went, and my daughter felt supported. She would never publicly talk about anything that is private in her life, but that day she did. I was there to support her. Susan Burton, which is a founder of A New Way of Life, was there to support her in being able to talk about that. And then I saw just so many advocates yelling chance. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. And then I went back and told Susan how important that going to Survivor Speaks was. And she was like, you really want to do this work? And I'm like, yeah, look at all the people, look at the love. If I could let what I've been through be a blessing to somebody else and it saved somebody's life, then God used me. And that's exactly what he did, because I became the Prop 47 specialist at A New Way of Life. And I started to canvass and door knock to tell people about Prop 47, that they could get their records changed, had so many meaningful conversations in the community. And it was natural for me. Like, I didn't have to try. And when you don't have to try at something that you're amazing at, that's purpose. So I knew that it was my purpose to do this, and I was gonna do it come hell or high water. From then, I learned how to run campaigns. And from learning how to run campaigns, got introduced to TimeDone. From me seeing one ad in the bed in county jail and thinking about it and saying that I would love to have a second chance, and if I did, what would I do with it? Like, that was the first thing, is speaking it into existence, and then advocating for myself, and then being willing to go out in the community and advocate and tell people that they could change their lives too, and telling my story. That's what led the pathway for me to be able to walk in my purpose and work with amazing people.
Whew, I got chills right now. Huge shout out to you, Ingrid, for having so much strength, resiliency, but also not only thinking about yourself, but your family and also others as well. And I know you, and I also want you to share. I think we don't talk about this enough, is the importance of stability. You also have recently became a homeowner. Can you talk a little bit about all the stuff that you've been through, and now you are a homeowner, and what are the opportunities that's been able to provide for yourself and your family?
Yes, I grew up in South Central, once again, during the war on drugs in the 80s. Went from there, and then being cycled in and out of incarceration, very hard to find an apartment. So I was always living in unsafe neighborhoods. I remember when I first started being an advocate, Susan Burton sat me down, and then she helped me get my kids out the system. She helped me with my daughter and just so many other things, just as a mentor. She sat me down right when, I was about to get my kids back. And she was like, a lot of times people think about these systems and they use them as a crutch. She was like, you have the opportunity to work, pay rent, save money, and own a home. She was like, is that something that you want to step out and do? I'm like, yeah, because one person in my family owns a house. And that's just not a conversation that we have. Home ownership, wealth, that's not a conversation that we have. It's always, what can you do to get from point A to point B? Always in survival mode. That's how I had to survive, having a record, always in survival mode. She just presented to me an idea that I had never thought of. And I'm like, well, my mom was on Section 8 and she been having it. She was like, listen, baby, it's time to break them generational curses. And even if you got to be the one to step out and do it and struggle for a minute just so you could have the blessing and be able to inspire somebody else, you got to do it. That conversation planted a seed. I didn't buy a house right then, but it planted the seed. And when I was ready to buy a house, right before I started working for TimeDone, I asked myself, I'm like, do you want a house? And if you want a house, how bad do you want it? And what are you willing to do to put yourself in position to get there? I talked to a lender and he said, this is everything that you got to do. My credit was a 3. He said it wasn't a 3 for real, but it was
Yeah.
low. He was like, you got to get it together. This is what you got to do. I listened to him because I wanted it bad enough, and I paid my bills. I got my credit score up. I started working for TimeDone 2 years later. And of course, that comes with better job, better pay. I now have benefits that I didn't have before, just all of the stuff, retirement. So I'm like, Ingrid, you better take this opportunity and go get you a house. And it was like, at this point, it wasn't just about getting a house. It was like, I got to break this curse and I got to build stability for my kids. You know what I'm saying? I could floss and say, oh, yeah, I'm a homeowner, but what does that mean to your kids? What does that mean to leaving a legacy for your baby? So when they grow up, you have built something and you have planted something to show them that you could start here, that you don't have to struggle. Because they tell us this lie that when we Black and when we born in poor communities that we gotta struggle. That is a lie from the pits of hell. And so I knew that it was important for me to do what I needed to do, to take advantage of the opportunity to buy a home and buy it, because I'm breaking a generational curse. I'm setting my kids up for wealth, and I'm also making my dream come true that I did not think was ever gonna happen. When I came to started working for TimeDone, they laid out the whole member service platform, right? And so credit.org was one of them. And so I'm like, oh, you better get on top of it, get on them classes. You know what I'm saying? So you can see what you need to do. And it was funny because I had to go through the training for credit.org to qualify for my home loan. Having that connection to credit.org was amazing because I got tips and tricks before I even was in the position to buy a home, just being a part of TimeDone. I'm like, they got all these resources. The education that we get from credit.org works because I went through it. I learned all the tips and tricks to how to get my credit up, and also was able to take advantage of the home buyer program that they have that qualifies you to be able to get a home loan and buy a house. So not just being a leader, but being humble enough to take advantage of the resources, use them, and then use it as a story to inspire people.
That's dope. I did not know that, Ingrid. The service that we offer to our members, you say, I'm going to take this upon myself and go through the same process
Yep.
and look at one of the outcomes. You became a homeowner, which is amazing. And my last question for you, are there any words of encouragement for our listeners out there?
A word of encouragement is don't believe the narrative that they put out on TV about what a victim looks like. A victim could look like anything and could be anybody and could come from anywhere. More specifically, just because you start out as a victim doesn't mean that has to be a sentence for your whole entire life. You can go from being a victim to definitely being victorious, to being a survivor. That's what Survivor Speaks is about. Me going to Survivor Speaks helped me know that I don't have to sit in that trauma, that anger, that pain, and I could turn it to passion, which I did, and go down to the board of supervisors or go down to the city council members and, speak truth to power because I'm qualified to do it because of my experience, and let them know that my experience is my seat at the table and I know what the solutions are, not what the narrative says on TV or the stories that they tell on TV. We tell our own stories. We write our own stories. We have the ability to rewrite what history has laid out for us and make it look more equitable for people who have been victimized that are now survivors, who will be victimized in the future, for people who have been impacted with a record, who may go to jail in the future. We have the ability to lay out the red carpet for what equality looks like and for systems that should be built to serve people that is more equitable.
There it is, y'all. You all heard from the one and only Ingrid Archie, a organizing director for Time Done. Once again, if you want to learn more about the Time Done movement, go to timedone.org. If you are in states like California, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, join the movement, right? The Time Done team hosts national calls, statewide calls. A lot of activities are happening as well for the Time Done movement. Once again, Ingrid, thank you so much for your leadership. I love our conversations, Ingrid. And so if you are listening out there, you're going to hear more about this conversation that we talked about today, this victimization to incarceration and pipeline, and how we break that as well. So once again, thank you so much, Ingrid, for joining today's episode of the Crime Survivor Speak podcast.
Let's go. Let's
Let's
do
make
it.
it happen. Let's make it happen. So once again, thank you so much for everyone for listening to today's episode. Once again, to become a member of Time Done, you can go to timedone.org. To become a member of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, you go to CSSJ.org. Remember, you can tune into all podcast episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other streaming platforms. At CSSJ, we are healing through action. At CSSJ, we say when survivors speak, change happens. Ingrid, what do y'all say at Time Done?
Time done, period.
There we go. Thank you all so much, and talk to you all soon.